Millennial parenting. There is this unspoken, ongoing war about how parents of this generation want to raise their kids and how our parents raised us. I'm Tomike Edewor. I'm at Lighthouse Lekki. Interested in this conversation? This is Real Talk. I'm genuinely excited about today's topic because I feel like I need this conversation to happen. I recently got married.
Woo!
I don't have, thank you. I don't have kids. But when I look back at how I was raised and I see how my friends are raising their kids, I'm confused and clueless. Millennial parenting. When you think of this term, what does it mean? What do you think of it?
Trying to correct mistakes our parents made.
Okay.
That's what millennial parenting think when I think about it, or trying to do things more to this time, this age. You know, so many things we're more aware of now. So many more studies have come out about children. So I guess being more mindful. I guess that's what millennial parenting is to me. More mindful parenting.
Absolutely. So you think about that, and the children are very different. My daughter is 5, and she's very different from how I was at 5. I can tell you that for. So realizing that many of the things that worked before really are not going to work right now, and so you have to. I think you gain some respect for your parents because you realize that they were also winging it. They were learning because things that worked for their own parents probably didn't work for us, and it's the same for these guys as well. You have to negotiate everything, so it's a very different world from when we were growing up.
Yeah, I guess just like Georgie said, I think it's very deliberate parenting, being mindful, being empathetic. I think it's also like learning to know your kids. I feel like, you know, the generation before us, it was sort of like a one-size-fits-all mode of parenting where, you know, you just did the same thing for all the kids. But I think what I have observed now with, you know, myself and people I know who are raising children is that, you know, every child is completely different and every child has different needs, and you kind of have to, you know, tailor your parenting to the child that you are raising. And I think it's just having more empathy and, you know, just trying to do better, I think, for what we know now. I think that, you know, there's no way our kids are not going to look back and be like, oh my God, I would never do that. Yeah, but that always happens. So
let's talk about some of the things that we grew up reminding ourselves that we would not do to our kids. I remember how maybe my mom would spank me when I do something, and I'm like, if my daughter did this kind of thing, I'm not going to spank her when the time comes. But I know that in reality, your kids might do stuff like that and you might discipline them as well. You are parents. So what are some of those things?
Well, so for me, I'm still highly anti-beating as discipline. I don't necessarily believe in it. And I mean, there's so much studies, like Jody has said, there's so much stuff that has come out that shows you that is actually not effective. And I mean, and you can tell it's not effective, right? It's violence, and you end up sort of sometimes raising people who respond in a violent way when they are backed up in a corner. But it's very hard to not, like, instinctively you do want to spank, right? Because sometimes kids can be really, really frustrating. They're like little Tasmanian devils. But I think that what I've come to realize also is that when you feel the urge to spank, sometimes it's out of your own frustration or you not knowing how to deal with the situation. So it really has nothing to do with actually disciplining the kid. It's just you trying to exert or relieve yourself of your frustration. So I always try to be mindful of that. Something that I think I probably said, I'm not going to do, you know, and it wasn't to do with my parents, but just like, you know, when you're growing up and you hear people saying like, you know, I believe in outside play and no screen time. Like, yes, my kid gets outside play, but my kid gets a lot of screen time. I'm not even going to lie. It stays in front of his screen, and I'm like, as long as he's quiet, I'm good.
Enjoy.
It's absolutely fine. So in terms of things that I said I wasn't going to do, so I'm the youngest in my family, and when I was growing up, I was very, you know, if we were going out, I walk in front of everybody, and and my dad would say, "Can you come to the back? Why are you walking in front as if you're the one that brought all of us out?" You know, and I'm sure he probably doesn't remember, but I would say I would never say that to my kids. And sometimes my daughter is very like me in very many ways. She looks like me, she talks like me. Sometimes I look at her and I'm like, okay, I've never done this in front of you and you're doing it. So is that way. And I find myself almost saying some of the things my dad did, but I remember how, like I said, he doesn't even remember he said any of those things, but I remember. And for a long time, I found myself, I was usually the youngest in the room a lot of times. In school, at work, I was usually the youngest in the room for the level that I was at. So I would find myself actually course correcting many times to say, I hope I'm not acting as if I brought all of them out. And those are the kind of things that sometimes parents do or say to children, and they don't realize that it has a long-term impact on the child. And so I find myself stopping myself from doing that to my daughter. Let her ask all the things she wants to ask. Let her be as forward as she wants to be forward within reason, and all of those kind of things. So yeah, maybe that. I don't say as, it's not as easy. These days I empathize more with my dad, to say, okay, maybe.
I think that one thing that I definitely wanted to avoid with my daughter is to have arguments with other adults, in front of her, so not getting into like highly angered situations, but I'm sure that has happened, and then, so then you kind of get to a place where you start to like, to be more, so what I've accepted is that I will explain more why I'm angry. So, if she's concerned, I will say, look, being angry is not the best way. It's human, and this is why I was angry. So that she gets the process of what I'm going through as it feeling like a terrifying situation or a scary situation. It's interesting. I don't really remember my parents smacking me. It was very, very rare and far between. It was always for if things were. It was more. I remember one time I got out of the car in the middle of the street in Paris, and I just started, in a car that was stuck in traffic, and I just started walking off. So my dad had to stop, he had to park there, get out of the car, chase me down. So he was stopping everybody. And I remember him smacking me on my leg, but it wasn't hard, tapping me on my leg, and I'm being like, oh my God, I was so shocked. I was like, this is so intense. But it's interesting. I remember the lesson and I remember the smack, but I didn't feel any negative kind of recourse from it. So I do have like a 2-finger tap punishment for my daughter because she's very stubborn, like me. She's very stubborn like me. And it's interesting because as she gets older, it's less and less. But her knowing what the 2-finger tap means, because now I'll just be like, look, 2-finger tap if she seems to be getting out of hand. Because I actually am one of these people that I think violence can be taught, but I also think it's inbuilt. I think that kids have a lot of aggressive tendencies, even if they've never seen it. So they go and they scratch or they punch or they pull hair. And sometimes they don't get that pain is actually not allowed. So I almost feel like it's a taught lesson, like it hurts. If you're gonna hit somebody else, look, it hurts, and you're gonna get a 2-finger tap as well. So I'm not as non-spanking as Ozzy, but I'm definitely.
I'm not beating.
Yeah, no, but beating is
same.
different.
Yeah,
beating is a different thing because obviously when I was growing up, I saw
it's a reaction. You're just being angry.
Exactly. I don't believe in acting out in anger, and because when I was growing up, with my cousins or with friends, when I saw that their dads beat them, I was those were the more traumatizing memories that I have sometimes. I'm like, oh, I ran from somebody's house, ran as far as I could when he started beating his kid because I was like, this is insane, this is craziness. And so definitely I'm not into abuse,
I spank my children sometimes, but the interesting thing is this. So my wife has a joke around how I get angry. I'm angry and I'm talking exactly the way I'm talking now.
So just calm. Wow.
So it's this kind of very,
yeah.
So she says the children don't even know you're
can't tell the difference.
Okay.
Exactly, just feel you're talking. She's more vocal and more expressive with that and all of that. So actually when my children see a flip, they recognize it very quickly because it's rare. It's one of the things I realized that when you use certain types of discipline too frequently, it loses it. So if you beat the child and beat the child, it just loses.
Because it loses impact. It has to be the
child.
I think about it like when I was a kid, like even if I knew I was going to do something and even if I knew that I would just get beaten after, like, if they're accustomed to getting beaten, it's like, man, I'm going to do it anyway.
You just set your mind.
Yeah, I've already set my mind, like, you know what, I'm ready to chop beating. It's fine.
But talking about even the relationship with your kids, I remember seeing my mom as my mom, like a mother figure. Yes, she was there for me all the time, but I didn't really see her as a best friend per se until maybe when I grew older and maybe when I got married as well. It just brought us closer and everything. But I'm constantly telling myself that I think I want my daughter to be my friend growing up, although I don't know if that even has advantages or disadvantages at the end of the day. But what is the relationship like with your kids presently?
So for me, I think that what you've touched on is important. Like, so for me personally, honestly, I don't think that anyone needs to be best friends with their kids, right? Because they're still, you know what I mean? Like, you still,
I think we're all
they
aligned.
need to see you as a parental figure, right?
I guess
and a parent doesn't mean
things will be different.
No. So what I mean, but that doesn't mean that you can't be close to your children.
No, but it's the truth.
I feel like
how I said things happening in reality are different from what you have at the back of your mind, but when it finally happens, it's just different.
No, see, like I want my son to see me as someone that, you can tell me anything, I can be your friend in that way, but very much your parent. You know what I mean? Like, we're not going to shoot the breeze together, and like, I'm not that cool where, like, you feel so comfortable to do certain things, like maintain some of the boundaries, like lie to me a little, you know what I mean? Like, make excuses. But I feel like the generation above us, they tried to start start cultivating that closeness when we were older, at least in my experience. When maybe you were like in uni or after, then they started to be like, oh, well, tell me things, and
you're like,
but you didn't lay the foundation. You know what I mean? Like, it didn't start, like, when did all this start? You know what I'm saying? So like, and that's, so it becomes weird. So I think that there has to just be a balance where, and it naturally is coming from this, right? Being around them, spending more time with them. There is more of a closeness already, with my kids now than probably I had at that age with my parents, and it would naturally continue to, hopefully, continue to grow as we both grow.
At what age do you start instilling values? Is there a manual that says, okay, when they clock 2, tell them stand like this, bend like this, or don't do that? Then at 5, you tell them, ensure that if anybody touches you, you come back and tell me. At 7, or how do you do it?
I think values start as soon as they start understanding anything. I think instilling values is not just telling them what to do. They actually get their values from watching how you behave, right? And things that you do. And they start to imitate you very, very early. I grew up in a house with my mom. My mom yells a lot. I have a very loud family. Like, my mom's side of the family, they all yell a lot. And I remember when I grew up, I hate yelling because of that. Like, I just didn't like it. Just like a loud voice all the time. Just by virtue of being in a house and maybe you're upstairs and someone's downstairs, you're trying to be like, oh, can you bring this? I'd find myself just yelling in that way, right? Like, hey, can you pass the bottle or whatever it is? And then I realized when my son was like 1, he literally would stand over the banister and just start screaming or yelling. And I was like, oh my God, he's imitating me because he sees me doing that all the time. And so I had to know that I had to stop doing that, because if not, he would think like it was okay to just stand and yell people's names or like always be screaming. And so that's just how I see values. There's no age in which you're like, okay, well, now I'm going to teach you about manners, or, you just kind of just start correcting them. Even when they don't understand what you're doing yet. It's like habits. They start to realize, okay, I have to say please. Okay, I'm going to say thank you. And there's no time where you remember like, okay, from today, I'm going to start teaching them about thank you and please. It's just, and also to me, it's doing it to them. Because I feel like sometimes adults think it's like, okay, you are a kid, so, you must stay whatever. But then when I'm taking something from you and then I don't say thank you to you, or I don't say, oh, please, can you? Yeah, you know what I mean? So when you're doing that exchange, I think they learn those values, in that way.
For me, I'm not so new age that I don't believe that kids should be able to say, hey, hi, what's up, to my friends, because that was definitely something that with our generation, you say, good afternoon, auntie, good morning. That's important for me, because I actually think, as part of our African culture, I think that is something that I find that I've always found admirable, and what stood us out against other children when I traveled, that we were very respectful to teachers, very, very respectful to other adults. And it's not coming from a place of fear. It's just giving that acknowledgement. So for me, it's important that my daughter, when she comes into a space, because I know sometimes with new age learning, sometimes they're like, oh, don't force them. If they don't want to, don't make them, because you don't want to encourage them to go and say hi to people they don't like if they don't like them, because maybe there's a reason they don't like them. And I'm like, my sister is someone she likes, okay? She can say good morning, Auntie Cassie, and she can see my mom and say good morning, Nene, and have that. So I think, for me, you have to balance.
There's a lot of conversation online about how some men have the way they are today because of how they were raised. We see a lot of violent men, and we're like, your childhood was faulty. Our parents back in the days, would I say, pampered the boys compared to how they treated the girls. The boys were the champions. They hardly used to wash plates, but the girls were... Oh, did you work a lot?
I was the last child.
Oh, so you were a different type of boy.
I worked for
all the other kids.
Oh, wow.
Yes. Let me say you run.
So once my brothers started working, of course they were nice to me. They gave me money and all of that. But the payment for the money was wash my clothes, iron my. So for me, a lot of times I don't contribute to those conversations a lot, because I do recognize that maybe my experience is not as common. Yeah. But I worked. So my house was this way, and my parents designed it that way. It was a conveyor belt. So there were chores that were for a certain age band. And whether you are the boy or the girl, once you moved into that age band,
these are your chores. That's very good.
Yeah, that is how it's supposed to be.
I can actually relate with that, because we're just two. I have an elder brother, and growing up, I remember him doing most of the cleaning, the cooking when our parents are not around, taking care of me. So at times, I really cannot relate when people say, oh, I married this man now, and he's insisting that his mom used to do all the cooking, so is the one going to do all the cooking. My husband is somewhat similar as well. He was raised to cook, so he cooks at times, but I feel like so many guys out there feel like some jobs are supposed to be for the ladies. And this brings us into the topic of gender equality.
I think that even the guys who were raised to cook, when they, marry a wife, they think, or they think, I've gotten a wife now and you're meant to do these things. I mean, I know people who literally have been told that by their husbands, like, why would I do this when I have a wife? So I think, it stems from entitlement. I mean, it's everything, right? Because I feel like you try to do your best in your house, even if you raise, a house that's very gender neutral and, there's equal opportunities for everyone, and you don't expect the boy to be a king or whatever. But you go to school and, they're still using these old social studies textbooks that are still telling them all kinds of nonsense, right? I mean, you see, like in school, they still have these things saying the father goes to work, the mom cooks and cleans, all these kinds of things, and then out in larger society as well. You can't tell what is being modeled in their friends' homes. You can't tell, what they're discussing in school, or how their friends are raised, or how people around them are raised, or, and these little things, right? Like I remember being at a party, it was like a family event or whatever. And, everyone is sitting down. It's his cousins, like men, women, everyone, boys, girls. And they start calling all the girls to serve food, and they don't call any of the boys to serve food or do anything of that nature. But so things like that, I think, just continues to layer on that sense of entitlement.
But I feel like what I've noticed as well is that you find that because girls were almost raised with not as much expectation, that in the sense that they work harder, and you're getting a generation of very, very successful women, that are, that have realized that they've been pushed, like you have to fight for everything that you're going to get, because, you're always going to be put possibly second in certain households. And what I found interesting, and I've always tried to sort of properly articulate how I feel about the gender inequality in the terms of, I think that people think it's a greater failure to have a son that's not successful than a girl that's not successful. Yeah. So even if the son is failing, you're going to still buy him a car, because he can't. How can you not have a car? And your daughter might get straight A's, and she's not seeing a car, because you don't need a car now, you're a woman.
Yeah, you marry.
Or you'll marry, or your husband will buy you a car.
Don't chase away.
Or you chase away prospective people.
So you're not rewarding stuff in a way that is appropriate, in a sense. So those kind of little things, I would say, is what I definitely want to avoid. I definitely do think that you should just raise boys and girls the same, and you should reward merit. You should merit.
Reward based on merit.
Yeah, reward based on merit, so that you don't have a sense of, even as a boy, I think it doesn't help them to feel that, oh, I cannot fail, and also know that they cannot fail, because even if they're going to fail, a parent is going to step in and, smooth it over.
How early is it to start, speaking to your kids, your boy child, your girl child, about gender identity, about loving themselves, loving their bodies? Because the case of body shaming, like you mentioned earlier on, is something that is prominent. And, we also cannot ignore something that is happening these days. The case of rape, the issues of rape is prominent these days. And many people are saying that it is as a result of their upbringing. Teaching a boy to accept that this is not my body, it's a woman's body. The fact that she's even wearing something that is exposing does not give me the right.
Yes. I mean, like I said before, I don't think that there's a clock in my mind where I'm like, okay, so from today we're going to start talking about gender or whatever the case is. I think, like you said before, it's just once you're creating that safe space in your home and in yourself for your child, if these issues come up or if these topics come up, they naturally would be able to speak to you about it, or be able to be open about it, or express themselves in a way where they don't feel like they're going to be attacked, or they're doing something wrong. If you are a respectful person, if you are showing that, you have respect for all people, for all genders, you treat people with respect. And it also has to do with people, that are quote unquote not on your level, right? Like, so they're going to observe how you're treating your nannies. They're going to observe how you're talking to, the driver, to help, to staff,
Exactly.
And even, when they start to, obviously as they get older and they start to encounter, different things like in the media or in person, they're going to definitely come across like people who may not be of the same sexuality as them, people who may be, of different sort of gender identities. It's not about understanding and it's not about, I have to explain and break these things down to you. It's just about teaching children to be respectful of everyone. It's about teaching people to accept everyone. It's not your place to question who has a right to be and who doesn't have a right to be. It's just your place to know that as a human being, I respect another human being. That's all there really is to it.
All these covered basic human respect for another human being, and also teaching kindness and empathy.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of times that if you're a kind and empathetic person and you're somebody that really cares about, respecting and honoring other people's feelings and spaces, those kind of things will be totally abhorrent to you, you know what I mean? And it's instilling that in your kids that you, irrespective of anybody that you meet, you should always be kind first.
I feel like, there is an age or there is a time where you actually really do have to sit boys down and say, look, and give them a very candid talk about sex, but
They're
then
raging
explain
hormones.
to them. Yeah, do you know what I mean? And
Hormones
explain to them
make
that
you act
don't try and talk a girl into sex. Don't try and convince a girl to do this. Don't, no means no. Even if it is silence, if it is not a yes, it's a no.
It's a no.
Because I think all these things sort of feed into rape culture, and I think it's also how we respond to rape. There's a general sense of disbelief when a woman says she's been violated.
Yeah.
There's a general sense of accusations, why women don't even want to come out and even say it, because you're going to be attacked or you're going to become like a villain. And there's all these things people saying, oh my God, you're going to ruin a boy's life by accusing him of rape. Whatever. So I just think like there's a lot of work to do, but the work won't only be at home, although it starts at home. But in society as well, there's a lot of work to do, even at a judiciary level, right? Like in terms of how we are prosecuting rape cases now, the laws that we have protecting women or protecting children, they are not strong enough, they are not enough. We just don't have enough around taking this issue seriously, but expecting individuals to take it seriously when it is not seen as a serious thing, is a societal rot that, needs to be addressed, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And it's quite scary because we were talking about insecurities about our kids, and, the reason why we fear so much for our daughters is because of a lot of these issues.
Yeah.
Because, people also say, which I think is another thing that I find problematic, teach your daughters to know how to protect themselves better. And I'm like, or teach your sons
Exactly.
that this is not, that you should never feel entitled to that or to do that, or that it should even be allowed. And then saying stuff like this sexual, you're dressing sexually, or she was wearing a tight dress, she was asking for it, or did you see her on her Instagram? She was in Morocco. How did she get there? Exactly. And I'm like, how she got there is none of your concern. It doesn't mean that that rape is allowed. So it's these conversations that I find very problematic.
Yeah. Final words on millennial parenting.
So millennial parenting is first and foremost parenting before the millennial part of it.
Yes.
So, and it's one of those things that you learn on the job. I think we should get all the help that we can. Fortunately, there's a lot of information available. There's a lot of good stuff available to help us. And we should just take advantage of all of these that our parents didn't have access to, and their parents didn't have access to, and hopefully we can raise better children, and that would also raise better children.
Hopefully.
Okay.
I'll let Ozzy go first.
So I think what is going to be most important for me as a millennial parent is that I do not want to raise an ignorant child. I want my child to really be exposed to a lot of things, a lot of different cultures, a lot of different kinds of people, a lot of different kinds of art. We didn't get the chance to, when we're raised, I think we're raised on a lot of Western, sort of media, and, we had a lot of ideas that were instilled in us that don't necessarily reflect who we are as people, as Black people, as Africans. And I think that I want my child to definitely know the world much better, to understand himself much better, to understand the spectrum of people that exist much better, differently able people, queer people, straight people, trans people. I just want him to have a very open world view, and that is my goal for my child, I guess.
I guess it's so interesting because in some ways I still think of myself that is learning, and I hope that I'm taking things on board that I think are important for my child and for how she exists in society, and hopefully that she makes society a better place as well, and that I continue to unlearn mistakes that I'm making. I continue to learn things I think can help her, and also not be afraid to say when I'm wrong, so that I can also guide her in the right direction as well. And hopefully we'll be learning together, and I'll be leading her in the right direction. And if I have more kids, maybe they'll be taking over the world someday.
Amen to that. This was really insightful. Thank you very much. And thank you for watching. Do join the conversation below in the comment section. Follow us on our social media platforms. I'll see you in the next episode.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for having us.